Hello, I am Gepwin and I'm back with more Planet Explorers Alpha, and today we're going to jump into the create mode. Not to actually really make anything today. I can't see past my microphone. There we go. Not to really make anything, but just to talk to you a little bit about decals. Because I've seen a couple of people who do creation things, and there seems to be two styles. There's either using a ton of decals to cover pretty much everything you make, or using a very minimalistic amount of decals and painting, which is what I like to do. So I'm going to give you a brief overview and some tutorial on some of the tricks and things that I like to do for decals, because up to now I've really only used a single decal for all of my builds, and I've been able to get a decent amount of variety out of it, so I'll share some tips and things with you. Now, for anyone who does not know, decals are basically just skins that you can put on top of the objects you make. So if we make a quick box here, and we go to decals, there are 5, I believe. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, there are 5, 6. There are a number of decals that come with the Planet Explorers game. These would be them. And when you select a decal, you can then put it onto whatever area you like on your object, and you can see it can wrap around the corner like that. It can be put up on the top. It does a number of different things, and we'll mess with some of that later. But basically, it creates a flush skin. Like if you look at it completely from the side, it's not raised or anything. It's just a skin wrapping that goes along your object like so. And you, depending on what you feel like doing with or how you feel like playing with it, you can do a number of things with that. And you get some weird effects sometimes, but we'll deal with that later. So I'm going to clear this. Don't save. First thing I'm going to do is take you very quickly through how to create a decal. You go to the decal menu and hit this plus button on the bottom. Okay, and yeah, we don't have any effects yet. Just want to check. You hit this plus button on the bottom, and that gives you this menu where you type a path in to whatever picture you've made. Now your picture has to be smaller than 512 by 512 pixels, but except for some rare exceptions, like I don't have to use large ones, I just do. But you want to make it as large as you can because you get better picture quality and better detail on it. And it also has to be a PNG file, and I'll explain why that is in a minute when I'm making one. So to make your decal, you just jump into your favorite image program. I prefer Adobe Illustrator. And then we are going to just make a new document that is 512 by 512. I always had one set up from earlier. There we go. Now, once you're in your favorite program, this doesn't have to be Illustrator, it can be Photoshop or MS Paint or anything that can save out a PNG. You either draw your design in your program, or you pull a picture that you already had from somewhere and get it into the size constraints of your 512 by 512 box here. I am going to make a rounded rectangle, because this particular tutorial is all about how to make a single decal do a lot of work for you. So I'm just going to make a large, medium skinny, rounded rectangle. And I want it to be a fairly bright color. I think I am going to go for a green. But we're going to make it a really kind of brighter color green. We'll bring in a little bit of yellow there. I get a more brightly colored green because I want this to be an emission object. Now what I use my decals for is anytime I want something that lights up on my creation, some kind of, glowing panel or circuitry or magical thingy-majig, is anything that I want to light up and draw a little bit of attention to. And let's just make sure that we center this here. Come on, yeah, line 2. There we go. Now we're going to save that out. If you're doing this in Illustrator, I use Save for Web. You just want to make sure that you get something where you can choose to make it a ping, and then you want to turn on transparency. That's why it has to be a PNG file, because you have to have transparency on if you want to be able to see your creation through the back here. Otherwise, you're just going to wind up with a huge white square with whatever you have in the middle of it or off to the side, wherever you happen to put it. So transparency is very important unless you have something tileable that you want to just cover everything in as a square, but most of the time you're not going to have that. You also want to make sure that you have your image size constraints up on here. That's why in Illustrator I always use the Save for Web, because that gives you the option to make sure you have your height and width correct over in this panel. Once you've checked everything, you can just hit save and save it in a file that is easy for you to find and name it something you can remember. Like green rectangle, that I'm going to butcher the spelling of probably. But anyway, I've named mine green rectangle, green, there we go. Well, that, I definitely hit the N key, you heard it, there. Green rectangle, .ping, saved it in my misspelled Planet Explorers file in my Decals folder. Then I'm going to save that. And we no longer need Illustrator, so I'm just going to quit Illustrator, and I'm not going to bother saving the Illustrator file, because that was simplicity itself to make. Next, we have to type our path into this box here. And I've tried everything I can, and I cannot find a way to copy in my file path, so you have to actually type it. Now, for Macintosh, the easy way to find your file path is to go to your contextual menu here and do get info. I'm not sure what the command is to get that on a Windows machine. I know you have something similar. I just know how to get to it on my Macintosh. And then what you want to do is type this where users slash da 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 da, followed by slash and your file name .png. So I'm going to do that really quick. I might get a couple typos, so I'll probably skip over this bit. And there we are. We are done. When you've entered it correctly, it shows you a preview of your image, and you have this create option. One thing to note is that capitalization doesn't count, apparently? Capitalization sometimes counts, but I didn't capitalize this and it still showed up. So, leave that to your discretion. Some things it does count, like I know users on Mac has to be capitalized. Apparently, it doesn't count on this particular file name. Who knew? Anyway, you hit create, and then we are done with this, so we can go back to full screen on our Planet Explorers. There we are. Now I'm going to do a couple of quick little things to show you some tricks and stuff that I have been using with my decals. So I'm going to quickly, for our first bit, I'm going to quickly make a medium-sized 6x6x6 sphere. There, we now have our sphere, and we're going to take our new decal, our green rectangle, and we're going to put it on top of our sphere. Now, if you want to actually mess with your decals, that's how you put on decals, is with the decal menu. If you want to actually play with your decals, you need to go to the parts menu, and that lets you select it and have your rotation and movement and inspector options. So the first thing that you're going to notice is it did not put the full decal on the sphere. It only puts what this box here is intersecting. This box shows you the height, width, and depth of your image. Now the depth is the confusing bit, because your image has no depth. It is completely flat on the side, but the program assumes that it should continue to wrap it around as long as this is intersecting your object. So see, if I keep moving it through, it's only drawing on the area that this box is intersecting. And it's not drawing further out because our thing ends there. But if we rotate it around this way, oh, it's still doing that. It shouldn't have done that. But you'll also notice that it's drawing all the way through. As you see, the box intersects on this side and draws, intersects on this side and draws, and it just mirrors itself. If you had something that was a slightly more complicated image, just to give you an example, let's do this Hylian shield here. If you have something that's a slightly more complicated image, you can see a little better how it interacts. So we will start moving this back through, and you can see it just scrolls along back until it gets to the midpoint, and then it reflects on the other side, like that. Now let's say that you wanted your decal to cover your entire sphere. Well, for that, you're going to want to mess with the size. This is your size, this is your position, this is your rotation. So you can change your position with these controls. I just find it easier to use the sliders here, personally, but if you're very math oriented, you can use these controls. Now, as we see on this particular one, it's a large enough image that it's drawing all the way around in a circle. It's just not drawing the width. So what we need to do is change the width, which should be our Y direction here. Come on, Inspector. Change our Y direction here, which is not letting us change for some reason. We'll change our Z direction then. And this is some mysterious value that I don't quite know. For some reason, 0.1 is actual size. So if you do 0.5, that will make it bigger. There, now we've made it huge going this way, which is why just play with this, because it's very difficult, let's do 0.2, to predict really how big it's going to make things until you just play around with it a little while. 1.5 is still huge, 0.105 is still just huge. But anyway, you get the point. As long as we have this box completely encompassing our circle here, it is encompassing our circle. You can see that the pattern has drawn all the way around, and then it mirrors itself on the other side. Alright, so now that we've learned that, what if we wanted to use our solid color? So if we wanted this, for example, this orb to be a glowing green ball, well, we do exactly the same thing. We just use our green orb here, or our green rectangle. We increase the size. Let's just make this 0.2, which would be probably hugely overshooting on anything. You'd want to be slightly more careful, but since there's nothing else in our picture, I'll just make everything 0.2. And you see how huge that has gotten. But you see now it's covering everything except for this little bit on the side. So you just need to make this slightly bigger, 0.21, apply. And now we've been able to take our simple little stripes decal and stretch it to the point that it's covering this entire sphere. And then if we were to export this sphere, it would be glowing because we have this set as a, if we go to parts, we have this set as emission. Now if you just want it to be colored, if for example you had one of these shield icons or one of the logos or something, and you didn't want it to glow, you would set it to diffuse, which would, as you see, that's changed it now so you can see more detail. It's not glowing. As I said, I almost always use these for glowing objects, so I keep mine set to emission. Alright, let's go into something a little more complicated. Dang it, I keep hitting that tutorial button. I apologize. Let us create sword, don't save. Alright. Let's just make ourselves a nice large, fine, we'll make a circle. I did not think I had that. No, let's just make a rectangle here. There, let's make ourselves a nice wide rectangle just for some demonstration purposes. So let's say you want to have yourself a kind of circuit board pattern, which is something that I've done in a couple of recent builds. Well, you draw on your circuit boards however you want. I like to use the pencil tool here. Not the most efficient, but you draw a little circuit board looking pathway here. Or a H or F. I don't know what this is. Let's call this sort of a circuit board pathway. Raise it up. You can raise it up above the rest of your design. And it looks kind of cool. It looks like some kind of glyph or something that's been put on the side here. But if you want this to stand out more, like on one of my other builds, I wanted this to glow. I take the decal, and you can see it's already doing it a little, as it's only showing up on this particular layer. But we put the decal here somewhere. Then we go to our parts, and we move the decal out so that the box is only touching the front of the circuit board pattern here. Now if we move it too far back, it's going to intersect with the square itself. This particular one is just above the surface. If we move it back a little more, it'll intersect the square itself. So move it forward, and it's now covering more or less all of this circuit board thing. If you want to fine tune it, this one moves it by 5. Yeah, this moves it by 0.05 every time. So if we make this maybe 0.29, let's try 9. Nope, wrong direction. Alright. It is at 90 when it's good, it's at 8.5 when it's too far. Oh, 0.28. Let's try 6. Still too far. Anyway, you can just play with this. 8 is 8. Apply, still too far. Anyway, that's how you move it in other increments, but this should be fine for our purposes. Now to get it covered this entire thing, I'm going to just go into our size XY here, make it, let's just do 0.2 again, and it's starting to cover more. This one's going to be pretty huge. Let's just do 0.5 for our example, and as you can see, it is covering almost the entirety. Since it is a rectangle, it's going to need to be scaled slightly weird. You can make yours a perfect square if you want. I like the rectangle for some other reasons I'll go into in a second. We get 0.6, apply, and now with our one rectangle, we are covering this entire circuit board here. And as you can see, now our circuits are this glowy green color. Alright, now we can go on the back here. Let's do this the other direction. So if we go to materials and our selection tool, let's just cut out a pattern on the back here. Alright. We've cut out a pattern on the back, and just for simplicity's sake, we'll go to parts, we'll grab this, and if we drag this through, you'll see there's a point where it just fills this shape, like that. And if we wanted to, we could just put another one on the back here. But for simplicity's sake, if you keep it so that it's behind the front of your model, if you move it one more forward, you can see it's just the big rectangle. But you move it one back, and it's hidden behind this layer of voxels, but it shows up on this layer of voxels, and you get yourself an inlay. Just like this. So that's mostly what I do on mine. I'll put an inlay in my gun ammo or something, put the glow effect behind it. I get only what is on this inlay here, and nothing else, and that gives me a nice little glowing detail. Now, I said earlier that I like to keep these as rounded rectangles. Now you can have them as whatever you want. The reason that I like the rounded rectangle is because then I can also use them just as kind of custom detailing, because let's say so these rectangles just kind of go anywhere pretty well. They look kind of futuristic. So now I just have this weird little pattern on the side. If I want, I can go in and rotate them all. Let's just give them all a 15-degree rotation here. And all of a sudden I've just got an interesting pattern that has some glow effects on it. And you can experiment. You can use that, you could combine this with some inlay patterns and some circuit board patterns and things. But really that's just how I do these things because I like to use as few decals as possible, really, and I like to fill in the rest of my stuff with paint. And just another little note, your decal is always going to supersede your paint. So you can paint over the decal as much as you want. The decal is always going to show on top of the paint, but it's not going to show on top of actual highlights and or raised areas and low areas like the circuit board patterns you have here on the inlay I've got here. So really, if you're mindful of what you want, and if you take a little bit to think about how you want your shapes to look beforehand, you can get away with a lot using just the basic paint tools and a little bit of decaling. Now, if you're not like me and you want to just add, you know, more detail to your stuff with a decal, just go ahead, put your decal on the front. You can take away as much of the other material as you like. Not gonna really do a thing, but put your decal on, subtract all the excess material, and eventually you will wind up with something that looks pretty good as a shield. But in the meantime, you can also just use these quick little decal tricks to get some little highlights on the side or circuit patterns or things. Anyway, I hope you found this helpful. I didn't actually make anything interesting, but I hope you picked up a couple of tricks you can use in your own creations. I'm going to be making some more of my own creations as I get ideas, so stay tuned for that. I am Gefwin. I really do hope you've enjoyed, and I will see you soon.